So we're on 8-4, Pythagorean theorem. So the slideshow that you have in your ed puzzle is the description of how Pythagorean theorem came to be. You need to watch that. One of my students made that slideshow, and I think it's a really good explanation. Basically, the hypotenuse, the square of the hypotenuse, is equal to the sum of the squares of the legs in a right triangle. Biggest thing you need to remember is that only in a right triangle does Pythagorean theorem work. When you're dealing with a triangle that's not a right triangle, then you use trigonometry. So you can always figure out the angles and sides in a triangle, but you can only use Pythagorean theorem if you know that you have a 90-degree angle. How do you know which leg is the hypotenuse? Anybody? Michaela? You can think of it that way. It's the longest, it's always the longest side in a triangle. And in a right triangle, it is always directly across from the 90-degree angle. Always. Okay? So, it is the longest side, the hypotenuse, is the longest side and directly across from the right angle. Always. Okay? So then you have what's called a Pythagorean triple, which those are triangles that, and if you kind of memorize them, you will just know that they always form a right triangle. The most common one is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So let's see why that's called a Pythagorean triple. So which one of those, if those are measurements, which one of those would be the hypotenuse? The 5. How do you know that, Jace? It's the biggest. Perfect. So that would be, I guess we should write down Pythagorean theorem at some point. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. You've seen that before, yes? Okay. All right. So this would be my A, my B, and my C. It's really irrelevant which one's A and which one's B. Doesn't matter. But it does matter which one C is. So then 3 squared plus 4 squared should equal 5 squared if that is a Pythagorean triple, meaning it makes a right triangle. So Jace, what's 3 squared? 9. What's 4 squared? 16. And what's 5 squared? 25. What's 9 plus 16? 25. So that is a Pythagorean triple. Another Pythagorean triple you might see sometimes is a 5, 12, 13. It's another one. Which one of those is the hypotenuse, Sean Benham? 13 would be your hypotenuse, right? So that's your A, B, and your C. So 5 squared plus 12 squared should equal 13 squared. So what's 5 squared? 25. What's 12 squared? Good. 144. And what's 13 squared? Do you know off the top of your head? Good. 169. And if I add 25 to 144, I do indeed get 169. So that's another Pythagorean triple. There are many of them. Those are the two most common. The 3, 4, 5 is a really, really common triangle that you will see. Really common. Okay? So sometimes you can round it to a whole number, sometimes you can't. So let's say you had a 4, 10. That's not going to work. Sorry. Let's do a 9, 12, 15 triangle. So I need somebody to label this triangle for me. Who wants to volunteer to do that? Thanks for volunteering, Ty. That's awesome. Which one of those would be my hypotenuse? 15, and where is it? The slanted one, right? So the other way you think of it, what letter does that make? Look at me. L for legs, right? The vertical side, it's the two sides that create the right angle. Those are always your legs. Okay? There's a leg, right in between is your right angle. The side that is not included, that is across, is going to be your hypotenuse. So this is going to be 15, 9, and 12. Okay? So what if I gave you a triangle? We'll do some practice in a minute. Sorry. So, Ty, what is 9 squared? Ty, what's 9 times 9? 81. What's 12 squared? 144. And what's 15 squared? 225. I'll just help you. Okay? So you add those up. What's 4 plus 1? 5. What's 4 plus 8? 12. Carry the 1. What's 1 plus 1? 2. So that checks out. Okay? Okay, the converse of the Pythagorean theorem just says, okay, well, what if those aren't equal? What if c squared is not equal to a squared plus b squared? So if the c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, what you end up with is an acute triangle. Does anybody know a good definition for acute triangle? It's small. All the angles are less than 90 degrees. It's cute, right? A little cute one. If c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, what do you think it might be? Obtuse. Good. So it's going to be an obtuse triangle that will have a really big angle like that. Okay. So it has one angle greater, only one, greater than 90 degrees. Okay. This is on page 85, so let's do number 5. So in any of these triangles, first, be easiest to label what you have. So, Brittany, what is 9? Is that a leg or the hypotenuse? A leg. So let's call it A. What about the x side? It's a leg, because those two create the right angle. And then what's 11 going to be? The hypotenuse. Okay, so that would be C. So you know that your Pythagorean theorem says this, right? If I wanted to solve for one of the legs, what would that look like instead? If I know the hypotenuse and one of the sides, how could I rewrite that? Instead of making an addition problem, what's the opposite? A subtraction problem. So what you know, so if you have the hypotenuse, you know what the hypotenuse is, you know what one of the legs is, you can subtract that, and it would give you the other leg. All I did was move that a squared from one side to the other, and I have to move it by subtraction. Easy. So you could do 11 squared is my C, minus 9 squared equals x squared. So you either have a leg squared plus a leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared, or hypotenuse squared minus one of the legs gives you the other leg. Hi. Oh, my. Hi.
Sorry.
Brittany, what is 11 squared? 121. What's 9 squared? And that's going to give us the square of our third side. What's 121 minus 81? What's 1 minus 1? 0. What's 12 minus 8? So 40 equals x squared. Am I done? Am I solving for x or x squared? Yeah, you do. You're always solving for x in algebra. Always. Forever and ever. That's the entire point. It should say solve for x over our door, because that's always your goal. So what's the opposite of squaring something? Huh? What's the opposite of squaring something? Taking the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides, and I get an x. But now here's where those perfect squares. Remember we listed our perfect squares before? Let's list them again. What's 1 squared? Everybody. What's 1 squared? What's 2 squared? 3 squared? 4 squared? 5 squared? 6 squared? 7 squared? 8 squared? 9? 10? Okay, and you can keep going, but these in here are the ones that are going to help you. So using one of those perfect squares, Brittany, give me 2 numbers you can multiply together to get 40. Give me 2 numbers you can multiply to get 40, and make sure you use that as one of them. 4, okay, so you can rewrite that as square root of 4 times square root of 10. You can break radicals up into 2 factors. If one of them is a perfect square, it's going to make your life easy. So now, what's the square root of 4? 2. So you can rewrite that as 2 square roots of 10. And you can just leave it just like that. Leaving it as a radical is the most accurate way to leave it. So you're just going to leave it like that. Let's try the next one. Come on, brave ones. Oh, I'm going to pick. Rachel, you want to go? Hi. Pick 6 or 7, quickly. 6. Okay, so what do I have? Do I have 2 legs, a hypotenuse? What do I have? I do? Where's your right angle? Okay, so your hypotenuse is always directly across the way. Always. If you don't remember anything else, remember that. So which one's your hypotenuse? So you have a hypotenuse and a leg, so we're going to use this one, right? This is if you have a hypotenuse and 1 leg. So what's your hypotenuse? 16. So we're going to square that. What's one of the legs that you have? 11. And we don't know the other leg. All right. So 16 squared is 256. Rach, what's 11 squared? 121 equals x squared. What's 6 minus 1? 5. What's 5 minus 2? And what is 2 minus 1? 1. I don't think there are any perfect squares that come out of that, because 25 can't go into 135 evenly. There's nothing else that ends in a 5. What's the opposite of squaring something? Taking the square root. So you're just going to leave it square root of 135. It's just going to stay just like that. Okay? All right, so I think you have all you need to know for your con skills. I think you'll be okay.